Good morning. David Bond here with South Mississippi Outdoors. Today I'm going to show you how I make my crappie jigs weedless. A lot of people use monofilament line and they use dental floss to tie them on and super glue. That's fine, that works great, but I like doing mine to where they're a little bit more durable and they last a little longer. So tag along with me on this little instructional how I do mine. And I hope y'all like the video, and I hope you learned something. Alright, start the video off, I'm going to show you the finished product. So, down here in South Mississippi, I fish tidal rivers, and we experience a lot of movement throughout the day. And our crappie like to relate to structure anywhere from 10 to 18 feet deep. Sometimes I'll catch them 24 feet deep. But because the water's constantly moving, I like to use bigger jig heads. This is a 1/4 ounce round head jig on a number 1 sickle hook, and this is a 60-pound mono weed guard, and I'll show you in a minute the keeper barb that I have on there. So I know a lot of you've probably seen the videos, the guys making the monofilament weed guards and tying them on with dental floss or thread and then super gluing them on. Well, one problem with that, it takes a second for it to cure, and they do fall apart. And another thing, you don't have a keeper barb on the hook anymore, so I don't like using super glue to hold my grubs on. So what I did, I just figured up one day, add a keeper barb to my weed guard. So I just put a second bend on my weed guard, and that's basically all I did. Okay, so the first step, you got to make your weed guard. All I do is cut a 60-pound piece of mono about 2 inches long. The next thing I do, you want to keep your curve up. See how the line's curving? You want to keep the curve up so you don't have a crooked weed guard. And I'll show you that after I put the weed guard on the hook. Just a little trick you'll learn after you do a couple of these. So you first bend is to make the weed guard is you follow the contour of the natural bend in the line. So that way you'll have a straight. So mine's bent up, so I'm going to bend this over, and I hold my thumb. So I'm going to hand myself the line, and I'm just going to push it down a little bit. I mean, this really isn't that complicated. I'm sure a lot of this is common sense, but I mean, I can crimp this with my teeth, but I use a little small pair of pliers. Nice little crimp. So that's all it is to it. So there's your weed guard, and the next bend we're going to make the keeper barb. And you don't want to go too far back from the main bend, because you don't want that keeper barb to be in the bend of your hook. So you want it as close to that weed guard as possible. You want just enough to hold the nose of that grub onto your hook. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to bend it up. I mean, this really isn't that hard of a process or step. So now you see I'm just holding that line in my hand. That's all I'm doing. And I'm going to crimp that right there with the pliers, just like I did the other one. There we go. That's all it is. So we've got our, and I'll just trim that with a pair of scissors. Cut it long, don't cut it too short now, because after you get done with the jig, you'll trim this off. So, there you go. There's your weed guard and your keeper barb. And the next step we do, we're going to put the jig hook in the vise, fly tying vise, and do our first run of thread, and we'll go step from there. Alright, this is just a fly tying vise that I bought from, I think I bought this from Sportsman's Warehouse in Slidell, Louisiana. Y'all excuse my mess. It's my shop, all my fishing crap's up here. So that's how I hold my jig. I just put it in a fly tying vise. And the next step is I take my bobbin and I put a couple wraps of thread on the base of the hook, just long enough to cover the width of that weed guard. So I'm going to put my main base of thread on the shaft of the hook as far as that where that keeper barb terminates. That way I'll have a good base and the epoxy will adhere good. Then you don't have a weed guard spinning on your hook. Alright, I got it on there pretty good. Got enough just for a base. So I'm going to pop this excess off. You just pull that right off. And the next thing I'm going to do is, I don't have a camera stand, so I'm going to hold my weed guard on with one hand like this while I just do a few wraps with that bobbin thread just to secure that mono to the shaft of the hook. Alright, so I've got it wrapped all the way down the shaft of the hook to the weed guard. I'm just doing a couple loose wraps just to secure that thing really tight, and I'm gonna go one wrap in front of the weed guard, and I'm gonna leave the bobbin right there. So first thing I do is I check just to make sure if that weed guard's lined up with my hook, and I'm pretty satisfied with that. But we're gonna trim everything after we apply the epoxy. Okay, so here we are. This is the secret. This is what I use. I use Solarez UV epoxy. So basically this applies on directly to whatever you're putting it on, and as soon as I hit it with that black light, that epoxy is going to cure instantly. I don't have to wait for any glue to dry. I don't have to wait for 24 hours for the epoxy to cure before you can put it in water, because a lot of two-part epoxies will yellow if you put it in the water too early. It just looks bad. So with this Solarez UV epoxy, I can apply this and I can play with this epoxy and work it on that hook for as long as I want. I come back tomorrow and it'll still be in a liquid state. But as soon as I hit it with that black light, that UV epoxy is going to instantly cure. And this stuff is awesome. It comes in a I buy it in a 3-pack off of eBay or Amazon. And man, these little bitty tubes last a long time. I probably already done 40 or 50 jigs with this one tube. I probably still have 20 jigs left in it. So all I do is just apply a little bit of pressure, and I'll put a little bit of epoxy on this side, and I'll run it. I don't know if y'all can see me, zoom in a little bit, and I'll just run that down the shaft just a little bit. That's it. And then I'll go do the same thing to the other side. I'm gonna work that in that head where I can get good coverage, and as soon as I get a little bit of bead coming out, I'll drag that bead down the hook shaft, and then I'll stop. That's it. So I've got epoxy on that jig, and this is just a tool that I got from Harbor Freight or somewhere. You can use anything you want, paper clip, doesn't matter. I'm just going to make sure that the epoxy is coated on here. I'm going to make sure I got coverage all over all that thread. Just going to rub it back and forth. And this stuff will not cure on you until you hit it with that black light. I mean, you can't do this out in the sun because the UV rays from the sun will make it cure on you. Do this inside. So alright, I'm happy with that. So now that we've got a good coverage, and I coated that thread, and I got the epoxy to coat all over the hook shaft onto the weed guard. I got a little bit behind the weed guard and the jig head and around the keeper barb. So now the next step is just to hit it with this black light, and it will cure. But I just hold it on there for 5 seconds on this side, 5 seconds on this side. Look, It's already cured. You can touch it. Okay, so the way I cut my weed guards or trim them is I'm going to bend this back, and right there at the back of the hook barb is where I'm going to cut that weed guard. Right there, right where you see the barb on the hook, that's where you trim it at. I'm going to go right here behind that barb and trim that weed guard off. And that keeper barb, you don't want it too tall because it'll rip your bait when you're trying to put your bait on. You just want just a little bit of keeper barb on there, and I promise you it will hold it on fantastic. And that's plenty. That will hold that bait almost as good as super gluing it on that jig. So you have total coverage of epoxy all over the shaft of the hook, the weed guard, it's all tied on, and that right there will last you several trips if you don't lose it. So I hope y'all enjoyed the video. I hope y'all learned something. If you have any questions or if I left something out, just leave a comment and I'll do my best to get back to you and answer you. So, tight lines, don't forget, take a kid fishing.